Welcome to the Midland Money Mindset. This is a podcast that's all about getting your mind right when it comes to all things money. In every episode, we go deep with engaging guests who provide tangible takeaways and a whole lot of joy along the way. I hope you enjoy these conversations as much as I enjoyed having them. Let's dive into today's show. Well, hello, everybody. I am really excited for today's show. I have the pleasure of spending some time today with Brian Tully, founder and managing partner of the Tully Law Group. Welcome to the show, Brian.
Thank you, Larry. It's great to be here. It's great to see you. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. So listen, we'll spend a lot of time on what you're doing today,
Mm-hmm.
but I am truly fascinated by the entrepreneurial journey, and a lot of the folks that are listening to our show
Mm-hmm.
are entrepreneurs themselves.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll talk about Tully Law Group and what you're up to today, but perhaps give us a little background. What brought you to the point of being an entrepreneur and starting Tully Law Group? How did you get there?
Sure. So interesting. Law and business, those are words that don't usually, connect with each other. Lawyers are supposed to be law firm owners, and that's that. But the reality is it's 2024 and you have to run a business. You have to be an entrepreneur if you're going to do it and grow. So the path to actually getting into law was primarily through my grandfather. My dad's dad was a lawyer for decades in Brooklyn and then in Lynbrook over in Nassau County. And when I was in college, as we all kind of do, I was a little astray, and he sat me down and kind of gently guided me into law school, and it changed my life. So graduated law school in 97, started practicing in January of 98. And from there, what's very interesting, I could say that's where it all began, because I never truly worked for a law firm that did any type of elder care or estate planning work. I started with the guy I studied for the bar exam. His dad had a litigation firm, and all I've ever wanted to do since during law school is elder care and estate planning work. So I actually just used their conference room. They let me set up shop in their conference room, did some work for them on the side, but I started growing what would soon become, the Tully Law Firm and now Tully Law Group over the years. So it's been a self-taught, self-learned journey. A lot of, I'm not going to say sleepless nights, but a lot of sleepless times, a lot of stress, and a lot of exciting good times, a lot of appreciation. When you're working with families in such a difficult and sensitive area, there are families that are grateful for the help and the support they receive. So it's been stressful at times, but it's also been very, very joy filled at times as well, helping. So I started 26 years ago, and we've had some, partnership this, partnership that, but ultimately it's been my own firm once again since 2016,
Nice.
And we've grown. We're a team of 26 over here in Melville and in Riverhead.
Nice. So let me ask you a question. Was there any entrepreneurial background? Like, was there somebody that was that you admired that was an entrepreneur that kind of led you in this direction, or what? Are you first generation entrepreneur?
First generation. I know my grandfather, the one I'm talking about, Andrew Tully, he himself worked on his own. But for the most part, Dad was in the banking industry. And I think it was just my own desire to be in control of what's happening and just never being comfortable with the status quo, always trying to make things better. So I've never loved working for other people.
Sure. I say that all the time. I'm unemployable.
Got it.
So listen, for those of who are listening, just at a high level, can you give us an overview of what estate planning is?
Sure.
And why it's so important for individuals and families?
Yeah. So estate planning has been around for, I'll say, a millennia. It's been around for 1,000 years. The idea of giving somebody property to hold for you while you go do something else, that was the first form of a trust. And again, that's hundreds and hundreds of years old. Estate planning, as we know it, though, evolved throughout the last, I'd say, century. The idea of saying, upon my passing, this is where my assets go, was really step two. But it has evolved and evolved throughout the decades. So now estate planning also encompasses the idea of incapacity planning. So as we age, who's going to help me make decisions? Who's going to help me if I need care? So the big umbrella of estate planning includes, yes, inheritances to my loved ones. Who inherits? When do they inherit? How do they inherit? But it also includes the idea of aging and disability and the need for long-term care. And there's a lot more parts to it, but that's really the two main prongs of it.
Yeah, and I want to delve a little bit deeper
Yeah,
into the care component of that because I
sure.
know that's something important and somewhat unique to the Tully Law
Yeah,
Group, which we'll talk about in a minute. But
sure.
what do you think, for people who are out there? I mean, I think that there are some common misconceptions that people have
Mhm.
about estate planning. What do you think some of those are?
Sure. I think a lot of people actually believe that they don't need to undertake any type of estate planning, that things are going to just really take care of themselves. That's statistically proven. You have about 20-25% of Americans with a will. And much less than that actually have a comprehensive plan in place. And to be a little tangent, a will is important, but as I tell every client, you're going to have a will. It's going to be a very comprehensive will, but I never want you to use it. A
Hmm.
last will and testament is going to require a court proceeding called probate, which again, people don't understand what that is. They've never learned perhaps, but a probate proceeding is Long Island, New York, you're talking about anywhere from 6 to 18 months to complete that type of a process before people inherit from you. So I think there's a lack of knowledge about it. There's a lack of urgency. I think there's a mortality to it. People don't really want to deal with end of life. They don't want to deal with illnesses. They don't want to deal with passing away. So that I think is a huge stumbling block. Another point is, I think people believe they can just get a do-it-yourself type of plan, whether it's an online form or go to your real estate attorney or your divorce attorney and say, I need a will, and they do it, and you think you're done. I can't tell you how many times during a month we sit with clients that say, hey, Brian, I don't need a power of attorney. I already have one. Let me see it. And that power of attorney we're going to look at is going to be the wrong one. They got it online or they got it from an attorney that doesn't specialize in estate planning as we do, and it's lacking crucial information, and it's not even worth the paper it's printed on. So there's a lot of misinformation, and people check the box and think they got a basic plan. The only way I think a person, a family, a client can be comfortable is if they go to an experienced attorney that handles estate planning, elder law matters, and has the history and the reviews and the firm to show that they actually know what they're doing, just like in the financial field.
Yeah. Listen, I want to point out two things that you said because I find it very interesting, and I think we should
Yeah,
put some emphasis on it, right?
yeah,
One is when you said avoiding probate, at
hmm
least here in New York, one thing you didn't
right,
say was you want to save money, right? That wasn't what you said. You said it's going to take 6 to 18 months, which
right,
basically means if you're the beneficiary and ultimately
hmm
the person inheriting these funds,
right,
you could wait a very long time to see those
hmm
funds. And there might be assets that need to
hmm
be kept up
right,
over that 6 to 18 month
right,
period, which could end up costing you money. But more important than that, it's a lot of time. And that's the thing that we try to impress upon
yeah,
people that we're
sure,
working with is that big time savings. Um,
sure,
the other thing that you said, which
hmm
I can share anecdotally, we had a family who had
hmm
a one of those wills that you mentioned, like, out of the box. Actually, they went to the family attorney who was predominantly a
hmm
real estate attorney who drew up a will. And, at this point, they had really gotten some significant assets, and we had a meeting with an estate planning attorney. And the
hmm
long and the short of it was the estate planning attorney said, you might as well go home and take the will you currently have and throw it in the fireplace because you'd be better off not
that's right.
having any will at all than having this one.
That's
And,
right.
I think people
Yeah,
don't realize or understand
yeah.
that point, right?
Yeah, very, very true. The New York has a default law. Every state has a default law. So if there is no will, this is what's going to happen. And sometimes that might be more fair than what was written mistakenly or incorrectly into a document, for sure.
Yeah.
And there's plenty
So,
of other reasons to avoid probate, but those we'll stick with that time one for sure. no
Yeah,
control
I mean, that's a
whatsoever.
big one here is,
Oh,
and I know that's other states maybe and, large expenses.
yeah,
There may be other reasons, but right
yeah.
now that seems to be like a huge, reason to get your estate
Let
planning in
me
order is because of that
let,
time
let me
saving.
sh- let me share one other main reason, and it's in New York, and I think this is other states as well. A probate proceeding is a public proceeding.
Right,
So everything that's filed in the courthouse, so the assets your children are inheriting, their your children's addresses, where they live, are they minors, are they disabled? That's all in the public realm. And we literally get calls and mailings from people that want to buy estate houses, for example. So there are literally companies going into the courthouses, photocopying all that data. And in this day and age, you don't want that at all.
right.
So that's all I'll say
Another
about
another
it.
great reason why they should
Yeah.
come see you or a qualified estate
Yes.
planning attorney for sure.
Yep.
What one of the most joyful parts of speaking with business owners
Mhm.
is learning how they model their practices in support of their, vision. And
Mhm.
having worked with your group, the Tully Law Group, I know that you have a social worker on staff, and
Right.
I found that this is somewhat unique to your practice. Can you talk about those services, why you have this
Sure.
social worker on
Sure.
staff and
Sure.
how this stakeholder in particular, serves your mission and vision for the company?
Sure, sure. Thank you for asking that. The vision evolved over years. Basically, started in about 2004 when I realized, as a younger attorney, that I am sitting there helping them with what I now call the documents and the dollars. That's all I was doing for folks. Maybe it was a Medicaid application or a trust. Um, but the more you talk to children and spouses whose elders and loved ones are going through these long-term care challenges, they are there for so much more than just a trust. They're there for so much more than just getting the care paid for through the Medicaid program. They're there because their loved one needs help. Dad needs help. He's in a rehab facility. They're sending him home soon. How are we going to handle that? So, as you peel that onion back, you start realizing my paperwork is probably the least important as to what's going on. It's necessary, but it's the least important. And there are so many qualified attorneys, as you said, that can handle it. So, back in '04, this issue of an idea of let's really try to help families. I developed something called the Elder Care Resource Center, which was, again, resources for people, different website, different brochures, built a physical resource center. It was the first on Long Island. Uh, but as '05, '06 goes by, I'm realizing, you know what, there are real care needs here. So in 2008, I founded, or didn't create, but I found what's called the Life Care Planning Law Firms Association. That is a nationwide organization of elder care attorneys that will have a care coordinator on staff. I've been involved with them since 2009. I'm actually the president of the National Association at this point. But that thrust of that practice is making sure that the loved ones will find and receive and get the best care possible paid for. So in 2009, we hired our first social worker. As of now, we have four. So I actually have a registered nurse on staff. I have two geriatric social workers, as well as a case manager. They are all our elder care coordinators. And truly, since 2009, we've been providing the level of service that I knew that we've been meaning to provide for the 10, 15 years before that. So you look at our reviews online, 90% of those are happy families because they're getting the care support, that emotional support. Nobody knows if unfortunately, something happens to mom and she deteriorates. Families don't know where to turn. If you have 80-year-old dad and 80-year-old mom, and the kids are busy, they're not in New York, they don't know what's going on, taking that first step is going to be the hardest one. So every potential client that calls us, every family member that calls, is at that time being transferred to one of our care coordinators to learn more about the care issues, because it is so important to us. Several of my colleagues have social workers on staff as well. I'm happy to see it. The way that we do this life care service, though, it is a very hands-on 12-month service. So we're helping families come heck or high water for the 12 months. And then families often stay with us for years and years after.
Right. And listen, all good attorneys for the most part, I think it's table stakes. They should have the ability to do as you put it, the documents and the dollars, right? Work in
Right.
that
Right.
area. But this life care planning is an area that many don't get
Mm,
involved with. What
right.
percentage of, estate planning or elder care law attorneys do
Yeah.
you think utilize or go that extra step and have life care planning as part of their services?
Sure. So surprisingly, there's just under 100 firms nationwide that practice this way.
Wow, that's it.
Remarkably, with that model. So again, I do know attorneys, good attorneys that will have a advocate on staff, a social worker on staff. That's good. Just different level of service. That's all. So
Mhm.
there's more attorneys recognizing the need. And as I tell people, life care planning with the advocacy work, that is 100% the future of elder law. And I can say we've been doing it the first since the beginning.
Yeah. And I agree with the families that I know we've
Yeah.
worked with together,
Hmm.
just seeing in many cases, like you
Right.
said, the documents and the dollars are something they
Right.
need to do. But really, the thing that keeps them up at night is everything else, right? Is making sure that
100%.
mom, dad, whoever is being
Yeah.
cared for, being cared for
Yeah.
properly. They don't know where, if they're being released from somewhere, they don't know where to go with the next steps. And
Right.
having
Right.
somebody from your team on their side is hugely impactful and very supportive to what they're looking
Right.
to accomplish.
That's right, and thank you for recognizing that, because the families recognize it, and it's
Mhm.
it's it's wonderful that they see that, and I'm just grateful they get the help that they need. The bottom line is, I'm not going to get into a long story here, but I was born in '70, right, and so during the '80s, I went from 10 years old to 20 years of age, and the grandparents that were in my life, my mom's folks and my dad's folks, they all went through a lot of decline and aging issues during the '80s. And quite honestly, it's because of them that I do what I do. But I was the kid, the 12-year-old in the backseat of the car being driven around to the doctor's offices, to the dialysis report appointments, pulling the cane or pushing the wheelchair. I did that for my formative years. And so everything that I'm doing now, I wish my own parents had to help their grandparents, their parents, 40 years ago.
And there's
Yeah.
your why, right? There it is,
There's your
right
why.
there.
Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure.
So how does estate planning, I think
Mhm.
as you mentioned, I think you mentioned it earlier, right? You have estate planning, and how does that intersect with the issues of, let's say, incapacity and end of life care? And
Sure.
what documents should
Yeah.
most people have? I mean, we can't talk to everybody, but
Yeah.
I believe there are certain key documents that should be considered. What
Sure.
what are those?
100%. So there's a national estate planning organization that supports estate planning attorneys. And last year they had me write an article about keeping the end in sight, keeping the end in mind, because a lot of estate planning attorneys will focus on taxation and inheritance trusts, which again, all important. We do the same thing, but people need to realize that there's going to be a point in time between that document signing and that client passing away where there's going to be a need for care, and where are they going to receive that care, who's going to provide that care, and also who's going to pay for that care. Is it going to be privately funded? Is it going to be a long-term care insurance policy, or is it going to be a government Medicaid benefit? So there will be some type of decline or health issue between the estate plan implementation and that person passing on. So making sure that there are certain advanced directives in place. For example, there's two healthcare advanced directives, and then there's what's called the power of attorney. The what we call the durable modified power of attorney is probably the most important foundational document. It's worth its weight in gold, and every client we sit with is going to get that foundational plan. It's going to be the last will and testament. It's going to be this durable modified power of attorney. It's going to be a healthcare proxy and what's called a living will. So, to go back to the power of attorney for a moment, that power of attorney exists so that you can appoint an agent or two to help you if you lose mental capacity, if you decline cognitively. And they're there to handle legal and financial matters. Part of the concern goes to the issue we said earlier about, part-time estate planning attorneys, so to speak, is that power of attorney is not going to be built to cover estate planning concerns or aging issues. The power of attorney is only as good as the powers written in it. And the New York State standard form is insufficient for estate planning purpose. So we have to modify it. That's why we call it that. So having that modified power of attorney, again, is going to be priceless if there is a decline in capacity. If there's a decline in capacity and there's no power of attorney in place, or there is a power of attorney without the right powers built into it, then the family is thrust back into a court proceeding. And it's called a guardianship, or elsewhere in the country, it's called a conservatorship. And that, I will say any day of the year, is going to be worse than a probate proceeding. So when it comes to cognitive decline, that power of attorney allows you to pick backup decision makers, right? That's our plan B if mom or dad can no longer handle their own financial or legal affairs. And you can always name successors. That's certainly possible. Then we get to the healthcare, where you can name one person at a time to be a healthcare agent. So if you are unable to make your own healthcare decisions, this is the proxy that will be able to stand there and talk to the doctor on your behalf. And then finally, you have on the legal front what's called a living will. The living will doesn't appoint anybody, but it is a statement that, as I tell my clients, if you agree with it, you sign it. And what it says is that if I'm ever in an irreversible or incurable condition, I do not want the machines to keep me alive artificially.
Right.
All right.
Right.
And your healthcare agent would use that document to say, listen, mom didn't want this, or dad didn't want that. So let's just do what we got to do at this point and let things be peaceful and dignified.
Yeah, great point. Thank you for sharing that. And one of the things that I come into, or being in the profession so long, like you are too, we see a lot of times people come in and say that they think they have everything handled, right? I got the documents in place, I'm all set, and then we through our discovery process end up realizing that they tell us that, oh, I have everything in a trust. And then we realize that nothing is titled in the name of the trust. So it's unfunded. What are some of the bigger mistakes that you see people make? And, are there ways for people to avoid those?
Sure. So the just to expand on the one you just mentioned briefly there, a trust is a crucial tool used in estate planning. They can be revocable, they can be irrevocable, and they're not going to be able to serve their purpose unless the word you used was funded, unless they are funded. So for the last number of years, we've been helping our clients ensure that happens. But we're still getting clients from other firms that are coming into us saying, well, I have a trust, and what does this mean? Is this asset protected, or is this asset going to avoid probate? And the answer is no, because it's still in the client's individual name.
Right.
So the mistakes we see 100% is the funding of trusts. Another mistake that we see is the assets aren't aligned. So you can have a trust leaving everything to two children, disinheriting a third, yet you can have a life insurance policy naming all three. So looking at the whole picture, making sure the assets are in fact aligned as far as the intent of the client, who's going to inherit, when and how, for example, that has to be covered as well. And just another mistake that clients make, and basically what we shared earlier, you need to go to somebody that's experienced, 100%. A specialist. Right. You don't go to the podiatrist when you have a brain tumor.
Yeah, agreed. Very well. And if you do, you can't expect to work out just fine, I guess, either.
No,
right. So,
exactly.
Let's talk about the children. You brought up children a moment ago. So,
sure.
A lot of parents, you're a dad, I'm a dad. And, even if we didn't do what we did, you find that a lot of them don't want to think about what if, right? And, many times because they don't want to think about what if, they don't think about what happens if they do nothing, and what if the state then decides what happens. How do you and your team help families understand the importance of planning when it comes to that?
Sure.
Doing something rather than doing nothing, and how that would be beneficial.
Yeah, it's a great question. The first step is this: it's education. It's getting word out there to the community that there is a need for planning. It's just, oh, I think I should have an estate plan in place. There is a need, 100%, a factual, literal need to have a proper estate plan in place, period. So let's assume we can get them to call us. Once they call, and then we could be sitting with folks who perhaps they have a taxable estate, or perhaps we're looking at sheltering a home from future Medicaid concerns. They may not be sitting there with that knowledge already, or that conviction in their heart. They may just be there to learn and listen. So the best way that we can convey to people and potential clients we're talking to is to share stories and to share legitimate case scenarios that have happened with other families. And there's 100 of them, as I'm sure you have as well. So getting them in the door through education is always number one. Talking to our clients about, listen, the service and the great job that we just did for you, please don't keep it a secret. Share, talk
Right.
to people. We want to help more people. So the idea of getting them in the door, then it's really about saying, listen, we one quick story. We had a CPA client who tried to handle the Medicaid application himself.
Oh, wow.
Very, very possible, brilliant guy. He could do it, but he didn't know what he didn't know. All right. So ultimately, the dad got a bill from Medicaid. They started paying eventually, but dad got a bill for $135,000. So the CPA, brilliant guy, made that little bit of a mistake that incurred a $135,000 bill. We were able to fix it with a couple of phone calls and some analysis. But there are things that we don't know, and we don't know what we don't know. So if we're able to get in front of the family, we certainly have the ability to convey real factual family stories to say, listen, this is a potential risk. Let's talk about it. How would you like to address it?
Yeah.
For sure.
Listen, you hit into, one of our core values here is
Yeah.
know our expertise and collaborate when needed. If
Yeah.
something comes up that's not within our exact
Yeah.
wheelhouse, we have to know when we got to lean on outside professionals like you and your
100%.
team. So thank you for that.
Yeah.
I want to talk about this because this is something, millions of parents are dealing with each year, and that is their kids, and they may still think of them as kids, even though they're turning
Yeah.
18,
Right.
and they're going off to college or they're
Mm.
starting their careers and they're single in a lot of cases, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
One thing that we did, and a story I share is, when my older son, and now by time this airs, my younger son's going to be
Mm.
18.
Yeah.
We had them both sign power of attorneys and
Mm-hmm.
healthcare proxies. And I think that gets overlooked very often, the importance of them. Why is it so important for kids, your
Mm-hmm.
18-year-olds,
Mm-hmm.
to have a
Mm-hmm.
healthcare proxy and power of attorney,
Sure.
especially if they're probably in all instances, but I think even more so if they're going to university or school,
Yeah.
right, for the
Yeah.
first time away from home.
100%. And so, as you know, so I've got a 22-year-old just graduated Penn State. I got my 21-year-old who just drove back to Syracuse after spring break. He graduates in May. Both of them had, and of course, their dad does this for a living, but they had a power of attorney and a healthcare proxy before they went to college. Hit 18 years of age, you get that done. Why? Number one, because stuff happens. God forbid, but stuff can happen. But also legally, when a person turns 18, they're no longer a minor; they are an adult. And if God forbid something happens and there's a call from, from the hospital that this person is here, how are you making decisions? How
Hmm.
are you making decisions? Now, gratefully, in New York, we do have a backup law where a parent can make decisions, but you got to jump through those hoops. It's easier and more efficient if there's a healthcare proxy saying, Mom can talk to doctors if I'm unable to communicate my own wishes. On the financial side, the power of attorney. Again, just like we said with older people and decline and disability, things can happen, unfortunately, to younger folks. So the if there's a bank
But at
account,
the
if
same
there's
time, Brian, and I'm sorry to interrupt you, couldn't it be as simple as your student goes overseas to study abroad for a semester and needs banking done? I mean,
100%. It could be
right?
that simple. It could be that simple. It doesn't have to be, my world. It could be just simply handling the financials while they're out of the country. And I even had one parent who was a little less trusting of their child and got an authorization from the university that she will forever have access to all of the records. So all of
Right.
the medical records, all of the academic records of everything for that child. So she kind of snuck that into the pile of documents and shared it with the child. And he said, okay.
Yeah.
But the reality is, once they're 18, they're adults. They may not act like it at times,
You may not
but they
think of
are.
them that way.
Exactly. But they're adults.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great stuff.
And so when we're sitting with folks, with clients that have 18, 22, 25, we'll always make a point. and I'll say this at every meeting, every adult, and if there's a 22-year-old there, I'm going to point at him, every adult should have the basic plan in place. May
Right.
not need a last will and testament, but that power of attorney and the healthcare proxy, 100%.
Yeah, well, let's talk about younger kids for a moment.
Sure.
What considerations should parents have in terms of minor children when they're
Mm.
creating their estate plans?
Yeah.
Particularly in terms of guardianship and
Yeah.
inheritance. I mean, they're two
Yeah.
very different things. But
Right.
like you said before, with an older person, if it's not outlined and you don't have that power of attorney, you may have to go through a guardianship.
Mhm.
I'm assuming that has the that process may take place even if it's a minor child too, that you have to be aware
Yeah.
of.
Right. So two good points. So the minor inheriting and then the inheritance itself. So if a parent passes on and there are minor children, and we've been taking an extra close look at this and actually been developing extra services for families that are dealing with younger families with younger children. Um, you're looking at a guardian being appointed by the court. So even if one parent is still alive, that is the biological natural guardian, the court is still going to appoint a guardian to ensure that that minor child is being taken care of. A little bit of overkill, in my opinion, and unnecessary, but that's what's going to happen in a probate proceeding. So the idea of avoiding probate, handling things through beneficiary designations or joint titling or trusts, will avoid that process. God forbid something happens. The last will and testament is the best way to name a guardian for a minor child. So that gets included in, of course, in every plan that we're doing where we have minor children or the potential of additional minor children. However, the idea of inheritance is a different one. So to have a child, like we're talking about 18-year-olds not necessarily acting like adults or treating them like adults, thinking they're adults, we don't want them inheriting either. A house on Long Island could be $600,000. And if you've got easy, and if you've got two children, that's a $300,000 inheritance hitting at 18, 19, 20 years of age. We unfortunately all know where that's going to go for the most part. As I say, it's going to be the Corvettes, and you know what?
Mhm.
So the reality is in the planning that we do when we have not just minor children, but children that are under any even 25 years of age, we're going to want to build in a trust to hold the money, protect the money. It's available to help the child with health needs and education needs and what's called maintenance and support, but they're not going to have full access to that inheritance until they're a certain age. That's really step one when it comes to inheritance planning. There's a couple other steps after that, if I could just get into it briefly. Um, Parents are also concerned not just about age and misspending, they're concerned about divorce. They're concerned about illness, some addictions, incarceration. There's a number of risks that are out there for our children. And quite honestly, an argument can be made for every parent to leave their inheritance in trust for a child. And generally speaking, we can make an argument that it should be a lifetime trust.
Mhm.
And there can be certain protections in there as far as divorce, addictions, and overspending and so forth. And you can even have your child as a trustee over some of it, but then you bring in another co-trustee that's going to manage any bigger distributions. So looking down the road, that type of inheritance protection is becoming more and more necessary.
Yeah.
And that's always going to be built in, or at least discussed, leave it up to the client, but it's going to be built into our trust plans for
Great.
sure.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. Great information there.
Yeah.
And, I think that this has been very educational. Love the life care
Yeah.
planning piece of what you're doing and your practice. And we end each of our shows by asking each of our guests the same last question because we are the Midland Money Mindset. We've used the word joy and joyful a couple of times, and we're all
Yeah.
about that. So, what did you do today that brought
Today.
you joy and put you in the right mindset for success?
So interesting. I've been on a journey myself. This about enjoying life more because life can be super stressful. I come home and my wife's like, "What happened today?" And I'm tapped, right? I mean, it just happens that way. Um, I've actually been working on building more of a positive outlook, and so this morning I could share specifically today. I started a gratitude journal. So I'm actually spending time in the morning going through that, and it's just a couple of minutes and it changes your mindset. So you're looking not at, oh, I got to go to work, or oh, I've got these meetings. No, it's what joy is out there, what's exciting today, what am I going to accomplish today, and it just changes your mindset. So thank
Amazing.
you for
Well,
asking.
yeah, well, if you need any thought-provoking tools,
Uh-huh.
as a companion to my book,
Mhm.
what did you the Financial Planning Made Personal,
Right.
we created the Joy Journal, which will help you kind of walk through your daily joyful journey. So, and you
Wonderful.
could download that right from our website. So if you want to, feel
Good.
free, Brian. You don't need to buy the hard copy. You could just print it right out, and if it's
Very
helpful,
cool.
maybe next time you'll tell folks
Take a
about
look at
that.
that.
Well,
Good. I'm
yeah,
glad you
it's
shared
been
that.
great having you on, and I
Thank you.
appreciate you taking out the time of your schedule to do this. Now, if people want to, we're going to have all your
Mhm.
information in the show notes, but if people
Okay.
want to learn more, connect with
Sure.
you, learn more
Yep.
about the services you provide, what's the
Yeah.
easiest and the best place for them to do that?
So it's the website www.tully Tully elderlaw.com. Tullyelderlaw.com. Everything's there. Contact information, phone numbers, and you can even set up a meeting from there. So thank you, Larry.
Awesome. Well, listen, thank you so much, Brian. It's been a pleasure having you on the show, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you. You too. See you soon.